My son's wife had no idea I owned the house they lived in. She called the cops on me, then this happened. Please stay with me as I tell you my story. And please don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. My name is Beatrice Washington, and at 56, I've built a quiet life rooted in hard work, family memories, and real estate. I run a small but thriving property management business in Birmingham, Alabama, and I've been a widow for exactly 10 years now. My husband James passed away from a heart attack a decade ago, leaving me with our son Marcus, my whole world. 3 years ago my mother passed away. She left me her home in Atlanta, Georgia, a beautiful brick colonial with a wraparound porch, pecan trees lining the front yard, and a kitchen that always smelled like cornbread and collard greens. It was the house I grew up in, the house I returned to after James died, the house that became my sanctuary and eventually the gift I hoped to pass down to Marcus. At 29, Marcus was finally finding his stride. After bouncing between jobs for a few years, he landed a stable position at a regional marketing firm and had been saving to move out of his cramped apartment. He'd always talked about wanting a place that felt like home, somewhere with roots and meaning. So when he called me one afternoon saying he was ready for a new chapter, I offered him the house. Come stay here, I told him. Rent-free. Fix it up if you want, and when you're ready, you can either keep it or we'll work something out. Marcus had tears in his voice when he said, "Thank you, Mama." It was one of the proudest moments of my life, my son finally taking the next step. I handed him the keys with pure joy in my heart. But I never imagined the woman he brought through that front door would try to take everything from us. Her name was Simone. They met through mutual friends in Nashville. She was polished, confident, and put together in that way that felt almost too perfect, like she'd rehearsed every gesture and smile. At first, I was grateful Marcus had someone who seemed to care for him. But from the very beginning, something felt off. It was like she had walked into the middle of our family story and decided she was going to rewrite the ending to suit her own vision. She moved in quickly, too quickly. Within just a few months, she was answering the door like she owned the place and redecorating as if my mother's handmade quilts and family photo walls were obstacles to her grand design. One day, I stopped by to bring Marcus some homemade peach cobbler, his favorite since he was little. Simone opened the door with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh," she said, blinking like I had caught her off guard. "You didn't call first." "I didn't think I needed to," I replied, holding up the cobbler dish. "I just wanted to see how y'all were settling in." Her eyes flicked to the dish, then back to me. "Well, we're fine. Just in the middle of some things right now." She didn't invite me in. Later that evening, Marcus called to apologize. "Simone's just particular about our space," he mumbled. "She's trying to create a new energy in the house, you know?" I laughed politely, but I felt it, that uneasy feeling of something shifting beneath the surface, like the ground was becoming unstable under my feet. Soon things started disappearing. My grandmother's handmade quilt that had hung over the stair banister was folded away in the attic. The old wooden rocking chair where my mother used to sit and read her Bible was replaced by some modern white chair that looked like it belonged in a doctor's office. Even the dining table, scarred with decades of Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations, had been swapped out for a cold glass rectangle with metal legs. When I asked Marcus about it, he said, "Simone's got a vision, Mama. She's turning the place into something fresh and new." "But this house is already full of stories," I said quietly. "It's not just walls and paint, son." Marcus didn't answer, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. Simone wasn't unkind. Not exactly. But she had a way of making me feel like an unwelcome guest in a home that legally belonged to me. She'd refer to it as our house with such confidence, as if her name was carved into the very foundation. Then one Sunday, she crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I arrived for dinner, something I'd done every other week since Marcus moved in. It was our standing tradition, our way of staying connected. I knocked, waited, then used my key like I always had. The living room looked like a furniture showroom. Gray walls, marble coffee table, not a single family photo anywhere. All the warmth had been stripped away. Simone stood in the kitchen, sipping wine like she was posing for a magazine. "Oh, you still have a key?" she asked with manufactured surprise. "I do," I said slowly. "Why wouldn't I?" She took a long sip before answering. "Marcus and I have been talking about how we need more privacy moving forward. You know, as a married couple." My heart stopped. Married? She held up her left hand, showing off a diamond ring I'd never seen before. "He proposed last week. We were going to tell you at dinner tonight." I nodded, trying to process this news. "Congratulations," I managed to say. But inside, something twisted in my chest. Not because I wasn't happy for my son. Of course I was. But because I suddenly realized I wasn't part of this version of his future. I was being pushed out of the home I had given him, the one he was now building a life in without me. What came next would test everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and protecting family legacy. And Simone. She wasn't finished with her manipulations yet. A week after they announced their engagement, Marcus called and asked if I would consider scaling back my visits to the house. "Simone is just trying to make things feel like ours," he said carefully. "She says we need space to build our own rhythm as a couple." I bit my tongue and agreed, though the pain that settled in my chest lingered long after we hung up. The next time I visited, after calling ahead like a stranger, Simone greeted me at the door in a robe and slippers, like I was some kind of service person arriving at the wrong time. "Oh, Beatrice, I wasn't expecting you so early," she said coolly, not moving from the doorway. "I texted Marcus. He said 3 p.m. She gave me a tight smile. "Right. Well, he's running late, but I suppose you can come in." Inside, the house was nearly unrecognizable. Every trace of my mother's presence had been erased. The soft blue curtains she'd sewn by hand were gone, replaced by stark white panels that made the space feel cold and unwelcoming. On the wall where our family portrait once hung was now some abstract art, black and white squares with no soul, no meaning. The living room looked like it had never known Sunday mornings, holiday laughter, or the sound of children playing. I walked past the dining room and stopped dead in my tracks. My father's wooden hutch, the one he'd refinished by hand and passed down to me, was missing. "What happened to the hutch?" I asked quietly. "Oh, that old thing," Simone said with a dismissive laugh. "We donated it. It didn't fit with the new aesthetic we're going for." "You donated it," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. She shrugged like it was nothing. "It was just furniture." "Well, it was never just furniture. That hutch had held decades of our family's memories. My mother's good china, birthday candles from every celebration, the serving dishes that had been passed down through 3 generations of Washington women." Simone poured herself another glass of wine as I stared at the empty space where our history used to live. "I'm sure you understand, Beatrice," she said. "Marcus and I are building our future together. We can't live in a museum of your past." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my mother's voice in my head. "You protect this house like it's part of your soul, baby girl." And I had been protecting it until now. Over the following months, my visits became rare, awkward, and heavily monitored. Simone would always hover nearby, correcting Marcus's stories, changing the subject when I brought up family memories, or outright dismissing my questions. "Let's not dwell on the past," she'd say in that fake sweet voice. "The future is so much more exciting." Marcus had changed too. Once confident and warm, he now seemed hesitant around me, careful with his words, like he was walking on eggshells in his own home. Then came the final betrayal. One Saturday, I stopped by to retrieve some important documents I kept in the house. old mortgage papers, insurance files, and estate documents. I had always kept a small filing cabinet in the study for family papers and legal documents. I texted Marcus but didn't get a response. Using my key, I let myself in quietly. The silence felt heavy, almost oppressive. I walked through the house, past the staircase where my mother used to take Marcus's school pictures every year. That wall now held nothing but a single black and white canvas titled, Modern Minimalism. When I reached the study, my heart sank. My filing cabinet was gone. The entire space had been transformed into Simone's personal studio, complete with ring lights, a white backdrop, and expensive camera equipment scattered across a sleek desk. I scanned the room frantically. No documents, no family files, nothing. I checked the closet, empty. I moved toward the small cabinet by the window where I'd kept backup copies of the deed and my parents' wills. Also gone. I stood there in shock, trying to process what this meant. Then I heard a notification sound from Simone's laptop, which was open on the desk. On the screen was an online marketplace listing for my grandmother's Tiffany-style lamp, a one-of-a-kind piece that had been in our family for generations. It was listed under an account called Simone's Vintage Finds, for $800. My stomach dropped. I scrolled through the listings and found dozens more items. My father's military medals. The silver serving set we only used on Christmas. The antique paintings that once hung in our foyer. She had been systematically selling our family history for profit. When I heard the front door open, I didn't hide. Simone's heels clicked across the hardwood floor. "Marcus, is that you?" she called out. I walked downstairs slowly, my heart pounding with anger and betrayal. When she saw me, her expression immediately hardened. "Beatrice, what are you doing here?" "I came to get some documents," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where is Marcus?" She crossed her arms defensively. "Out with friends. You should have called first." I held her gaze. "Does he know you've been selling our family heirlooms?" Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance at being caught. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I saw the listings, Simone. My grandmother's lamp. My father's military medals. You're making money off things that don't belong to you." Her mask finally slipped. "They belong to Marcus now. And he gave me permission to do whatever I wanted with them." "That's interesting," I replied, pulling a folded document from my purse. "Because the deed to this house is still in my name." Simone froze like she'd been slapped. "I never transferred the title," I continued. "Marcus has been living here rent-free because I love him. But this is my property, and those items weren't his to give away." I watched her process this information, saw the moment she realized her entire plan was crumbling. "I've let this go on too long," I said firmly. "But that ends today. You may have erased the photos, the quilts, the furniture, but you will not erase me or my family's legacy." Marcus came home 20 minutes later to find us standing in tense silence. He looked between us, confusion written all over his face. "What's going on?" he asked. Simone spoke first, her voice shaking with false victimization. "Your mother broke into our house. She went through my personal things, accused me of stealing, and now she's claiming she owns this place." I didn't flinch. "Did you tell her the truth, Marcus?" He looked confused. "What truth?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the deed, worn at the edges but still legal and binding. "This house belongs to me. Your grandmother left it to me in her will. You've been living here rent-free just like we agreed. But you never told Simone that, did you?" Marcus's face went pale. She assumed it was mine. And I didn't want to correct her because you lied to me," Simone said, her voice cracking. "You let me believe this was our home, our future." "I never said it was mine," Marcus snapped back. "You assumed, and I didn't want to complicate things. She's been selling our family heirlooms," I said quietly. Your grandfather's medals. My mother's lamp. Things that were never yours to give away, Marcus. He stared at me, then at Simone, realization dawning in his eyes. The dining table. The hutch. Where are they now? Simone's panic was visible now. I didn't do anything you didn't approve of. You told me to make this place our own. I told you we could paint some walls, Marcus said, his voice rising. Not sell off my family's history like it was garage sale junk. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. We all froze. Simone rushed to answer it, probably grateful for any interruption. But when she opened the door, 2 police officers stood there. Good evening, the older officer said politely. We received a call about a civil dispute involving property ownership and possible theft. Simone stepped back, eyes wide. I didn't call anyone. I did, I said calmly. I gave you every opportunity to do the right thing, but I won't let my family's legacy be destroyed. Inside, I showed the officers my documentation. The deed, the will, photos of the items being sold online. Officer Thompson, a tall man with kind eyes, reviewed everything carefully. These all appear to be valid legal documents, he said. Ma'am, this property is clearly in Ms. Washington's name. There's no lease agreement, no rental contract. Your boyfriend lives here at his mother's discretion. Simone's voice cracked. But he told me this was our house. We're engaged. The younger officer, Martinez, raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, being engaged doesn't give you legal rights to property that's not in your name. Without a marriage certificate or legal documentation, you have no claim here. Simone turned to Marcus desperately. Are you going to let her do this to us? Marcus looked at her, then at me, and for the first time in months, I saw clarity in his eyes. I think you already did it to yourself, he said quietly. And to me. The officers stayed until Simone packed a bag and left, slamming the door behind her. When they were gone, the house felt eerily quiet. Marcus sat heavily on the couch, his head in his hands. I never meant for any of this to happen, Mama. I know, I said, sitting beside him. But it did happen, and now we have to figure out how to move forward. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I let her push you out. I let her manipulate me into thinking I was building something, when really I was just hiding from the truth. What truth is that, baby? That I was scared. Scared of not being good enough, scared of being alone, scared of disappointing you. So when she came along and made me feel important, I didn't want to rock the boat. I reached for his hand. You could never disappoint me, Marcus. But hiding from who you are doesn't protect you. It just delays the inevitable. We sat like that for a long time, mother and son, surrounded by a house that had been stripped of its warmth but not its foundation of love. Then Marcus surprised me. He went upstairs and came back with a dusty box from the attic. I saved some things, he said, placing it on the coffee table. Grandma's photo albums, some of her recipes, letters from when Grandpa was overseas. It's not everything, but it's a start. I opened the box with shaking hands, and there it was, our history, preserved despite everything. Let's put it all back together, he said. And we did. That night, Marcus and I stayed up until nearly 2 a.m., going through old photographs and handwritten recipes. We sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by memories that smelled of lavender and thyme. Each picture told a story. Marcus's first steps in the backyard. My mother in her Sunday dress, holding a sweet potato pie. James at the grill, wearing his king of the kitchen apron, grinning like life was just that simple. This was the day Dad tried to fix the sink and flooded the basement, Marcus said, laughing at a photo of James standing ankle-deep in water, tools scattered around him. And your grandma made him sleep on the couch for a week, I added, laughing too. In that laughter I heard something I hadn't heard in months. Healing. Oi. the sound of a family remembering who they really were. "Mama," Marcus said quietly, "I'm sorry for letting her shut you out. For letting her change everything that mattered." "You're still my son," I said, squeezing his hand. "I never stopped loving you. I just needed you to see what was happening before it was too late." The next morning, while Marcus was out getting his thoughts together, Simone returned. She didn't knock, just walked right in like she still belonged there. I was in the kitchen when I heard her heels on the hardwood. "Marcus," she called out. When she saw me, her face twisted with anger. "Where is he?" "Out," I said calmly. "You should have called first." She laughed bitterly. "You really think this little performance of yours changes anything? Marcus loves me. He's just confused right now, and you're the one causing all this drama." "I'm not here to argue with you, Simone. I'm here to protect what's mine and what's best for my son." She started pacing like a caged animal. "He was nothing before I came into his life. I gave him direction, purpose, style. I turned this sad little shrine into something beautiful." "You erased his identity," I replied. "You isolated him from his family, his history. That's not love, that's control." Her eyes flashed dangerously. "I have rights, legal rights, marital property, investment of labor. I improved this place." I reached into a drawer and pulled out a letter from my attorney, prepared after our confrontation the day before. "According to Georgia law, you have no marital claim to this property unless you can prove financial contribution or documented ownership. You contributed nothing financially. The deed is in my name. Your claim is worthless." She grabbed the letter and scanned it frantically. "I'll find a lawyer who disagrees." "Good luck with that," I said simply. "In the meantime, you're not welcome here." She tried to push past me toward the hallway, but I stepped in front of her. "You need to leave. Now." The fire in her eyes flickered between rage and desperation. "You think you've won. This isn't about winning," I said. "It's about healing. And I won't let you poison this house any longer." Simone grabbed her purse and stormed out, but not before turning back to hiss, "This isn't over." But it was over. That night, Marcus came home and told me about the voicemail she'd left, angry, then pleading, then threatening. "Do you feel safe?" I asked him. He gave me a tired but genuine smile. "I do now, Mama. I really do." The next day, we met with my attorney and filed a restraining order against Simone. The court granted it based on her emotional manipulation, the theft of family property, and her threatening behavior. A week later, we discovered she had taken more than just the items she'd sold online. A neighbor called to report seeing someone loading boxes into a car late at night, weeks before we'd even noticed things were missing. With a police escort, we tracked down a storage unit she'd rented under a false name. Inside, we found our family treasures packed carelessly in plastic bins and garbage bags. The sight broke my heart. Marcus stood still, staring at his baby photos mixed in with broken Christmas ornaments and damaged keepsakes. "I thought she loved me," he whispered. "She loved what you could give her," I said gently. "Not who you really are." We recovered nearly everything. Some pieces were damaged, others lost forever. But the core of our family history, the photo albums, the quilts, my father's letters, was back where it belonged. It took several weeks for everything to settle down. After the restraining order was served and we'd reclaimed our belongings, Marcus and I began the slow process of healing, not just the house but ourselves. We repainted walls back to the warm colors my mother had chosen. We rehung family photos in places of honor. We brought grandmother's quilt back to the stair railing where it belonged. Every change was intentional, respectful, a reclaiming of our legacy. Marcus decided to start therapy. His idea, not mine. He found a counselor who specialized in emotional abuse and recovery from toxic relationships. Every week, I watched him stand a little taller, speak a little clearer, reclaim the man he'd almost lost. Meanwhile, Simone's lies began unraveling. It turned out this wasn't her first time manipulating someone. She had a history of targeting men with assets, moving in quickly and taking what she could get. Her tragic backstory, about being widowed, was completely fabricated. Her supposed interior design credentials were fake. Even her name wasn't real. She'd been using different identities for years. When all of this came to light during the court proceedings, she quietly disappeared from our lives completely. And honestly, I found myself feeling almost sorry for her. What kind of life must she have lived to think love was something you could steal instead of something you had to earn? But then came the Sunday that changed everything for the better. Marcus arrived for our weekly dinner with a bouquet of sunflowers. His grandmother's favorite flower. "I have something to tell you," he said, placing them in the ceramic vase that had belonged to my great-aunt. I set down the peach cobbler I'd been making and waited. "I found an apartment," he said. "Nothing fancy, but it's about 10 minutes from here." My heart tightened, but I smiled. "That's wonderful, baby." He reached for my hand. "It's not because I want distance from you, Mama. It's because I'm finally ready to build something real, something honest. And I can't do that until I prove to myself that I can stand on my own." I nodded, tears in my eyes. "I always knew you'd get there. And I want you to keep this house," he continued. "Not just legally but emotionally. I know now that this is your sanctuary, Grandma's legacy. Maybe someday I'll have a family of my own to bring here for Sunday dinners. But I'll never again pretend this house belongs to anyone but you." We hugged for a long time right there in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of cornbread and the sound of love. The next week, we worked with my attorney to set up a family trust, one that would ensure the house stayed in the Washington family while protecting it from any future manipulation. The house would never again be treated as a bargaining chip or temporary convenience. It was sacred now, officially and forever. By autumn, the house wasn't just restored. It was transformed. The walls echoed with music and laughter again. The kitchen filled with the smell of Sunday dinner. The front porch welcomed neighbors and friends. Marcus's therapy was working. He started freelancing again, creating marketing campaigns for Black-owned businesses in the community. He found his joy again, not in someone else's validation, but in his own growth and in our rebuilt relationship. One evening, as lightning bugs danced across the backyard, Marcus and I sat on the porch drinking sweet tea. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't walked in that day?" he asked. I looked out over the yard where his father once pushed him on the tire swing. "I think about it sometimes," I admitted. "But I believe things happen when we're finally ready to face them." He nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for not giving up on me, Mama." "I never could," I whispered. Then I raised my glass and tapped it gently against his. "To healing. To family," he replied. "To the house that love built," I added. Months later, we hosted our first real family gathering since before my mother passed. Cousins came from 3 states. Neighbors brought pound cake and sweet tea. Children played in the yard while adults shared stories on the porch. Simone's name never came up. She was just a storm that had passed through, leaving us stronger and more grateful for what we'd almost lost. But the house, our house, stood tall and proud, filled once again with the sounds of family, the warmth of belonging, and the unbreakable bonds of love that no one could ever steal. If this story moved you, or if it reminded you of a time when you had to choose family over convenience, legacy over comfort, you're not alone. Let us know in the comments if you've ever had to stand your ground to protect what matters most. And if you believe stories like this help remind us of the quiet strength that flows through family bonds, please hit that like button. Subscribe for more powerful stories about love, legacy, and standing up for what's right. Thank you for watching. Remember, a house may have walls, but it's your voice that makes it a home. Subscribe, like, and share.